Everyone in Bale believed Amara had the kind of life every woman dreamed of. She always looked beautiful, skin glowing like morning sun, her steps light and graceful, her dresses colorful and flowing like royalty. At weddings and events, people would whisper, "That's Kofi's wife. She's so elegant, so lucky." But no one knew what happened when the doors closed and the crowd disappeared. Behind her warm smile and perfectly tied head wrap was a heart that was quietly breaking. Amara was married to a man who didn't see her anymore. Not really. He looked at her the way people look at furniture they've owned for years. They're useful but no longer special. He didn't ask about her day. He didn't notice when she cried softly into her pillow at night. They lived in the same house, but he was always distant, lost in his phone, his late meetings, or sometimes just his silence. Amara tried to hold on. She cooked his favorite meals, dressed up even when she didn't feel like it, laughed at his dry jokes just to keep the peace. But nothing worked. Every effort felt like shouting into a storm that didn't care to listen. She felt alone. Not single, but lonelier than being single ever felt. And the saddest part? Everyone thought she was the happiest woman in the city. But Amara was just good at hiding her pain. And deep inside, she had already started saying goodbye. Not with words, but with quiet strength growing slowly inside her. Kofi was the kind of man everyone liked. He smiled easily, laughed at the right moments, and always knew what to say in front of people. At church, he opened doors for Amara and held her hand like a gentleman. At parties, he introduced her proudly, called her my queen, and made sure their pictures looked perfect. To the outside world, Kofi was the ideal husband, respectful, confident, loving. But that was just the mask he wore in public. Behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. At home, he barely spoke to Amara. Sometimes he came in late, went straight to the shower, and then into bed without saying more than a tired good night. Other times, he scrolled endlessly on his phone, laughing at messages she was never allowed to see. When Amara tried to talk, he gave short, cold answers. He never asked how she was doing. He never noticed when she looked sad or tired. Even when she dressed up just to get his attention, he didn't say a word. His silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. There was no warmth left between them. The little things they once shared, late-night talks, inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, were all gone, replaced by distance, by cold. And Amara felt it in her bones. She tried to ignore it at first, tried to believe it was just stress or a rough season. But seasons pass. Kofi's coldness stayed. The man who used to make her feel like the center of his world now treated her like background noise, still present but no longer important. And even though he never raised his voice or his hand, the emotional silence hurt deeper than any fight ever could. Kofi didn't have to tell her he didn't love her anymore. His actions did it for him, every single day. Amara wasn't stupid. She noticed everything. The late-night calls that suddenly had to be taken outside. The way Kofi started guarding his phone like it held state secrets. The soft buzz of a message at 1 a.m. followed by him turning away, whispering with his back to her. She noticed how he started dressing differently. More cologne, flashier shirts, and haircuts that he never used to care about before. And there was a new scent on his clothes too. A woman's perfume, sweet and unfamiliar, clinging to him like a secret he wasn't trying hard enough to hide. She didn't ask questions. Not because she didn't care, but because she already knew. His lies were louder than his silence now. When she asked simple things like, "Where were you?" he'd get defensive. His answers were always rushed. "I was with the boys." "You're overthinking again. Why are you acting like this?" And just like that, he'd turn the blame on her like her pain was a problem instead of a sign. Amara stopped asking. She started watching instead. Every missed call, every change in his tone, every excuse that didn't quite fit. She began to memorize the patterns, the way he smiled at his phone, how his mood lifted when he got a message, how he seemed distracted even when he was physically there. And through it all, she stayed calm. No shouting, no begging, no fighting. Just quiet strength growing inside her day by day. She realized something powerful. If someone can lie to your face and sleep beside you like nothing's wrong, they don't fear losing you. So she decided to stop trying to be enough for a man who wasn't even trying to stay. She wasn't planning revenge. She was planning freedom. Because when a woman like Amara watches in silence, it's not because she's weak, it's because she's preparing her exit. And when she finally walks away, she doesn't look back. It was a quiet afternoon when Amara finally heard the name. Aisha. Just 5 letters, but they hit her like thunder. She didn't go looking for it. The truth came to her, the way it always does when lies get tired of hiding. A friend mentioned her by mistake, not knowing the storm that name would stir. Kofi and Aisha were at the lounge last week, the friend said casually, not noticing how Amara's smile froze for just a second too long. Aisha. Young, loud, and always dressed to be seen. The kind of woman who posted everything online. Every meal, every outfit, every moment with a man who wasn't hers. Her laugh was wild, her lipstick bold, her energy messy. She wasn't subtle about anything, least of all the fact that she had Kofi wrapped around her fingers. Amara saw the photos eventually. Aisha's nails on Kofi's shoulder. Kofi smiling like a man in love. And the worst part? He didn't even try to hide it anymore. The pain hit deep, not just because he chose someone else but because he did it so carelessly. Like Amara's years meant nothing. Like the vows they shared were just empty words. But she didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her heart ached but her face stayed calm. Because something had shifted inside her. A door quietly opened in her soul. Not to revenge but to release. She knew Aisha wasn't the real problem. Kofi was. He made the choice. He crossed the line. And Amara? She was done crossing oceans for someone who wouldn't step over a puddle for her. So she took a deep breath, smiled politely, and began doing what strong women do when they're betrayed. She started walking silently, proudly, toward freedom. Step by step. No noise. No drama. Just quiet power in motion. When Kofi told Amara about the dinner, she already knew something wasn't right. He said it was just a casual evening. Friends, family, a few colleagues, good food, and music. But his eyes gave him away. There was something else behind that fake smile, something he wasn't saying. Still, Amara agreed to go. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, walked away, and started preparing in silence. She already knew what was coming. She could feel it deep in her chest. The kind of heaviness you get when the truth is about to slap you in front of everyone. On the night of the dinner, Amara dressed like the queen she was. She wore a breathtaking green chitinge dress that hugged her figure like it was sewn from confidence itself. Her head wrap was bold and high, tied with care like a crown. She wore gold earrings and a calm smile. She wasn't there to fight. She was there to finish something. The rooftop restaurant was beautiful. Lights hung above like stars. Music played softly in the background. People laughed, glasses clinked, and the view of the city below sparkled like everything was perfect. Everyone came up to greet Amara, telling her how stunning she looked, how lucky Kofi was. She smiled and nodded, accepting compliments like someone receiving flowers before a funeral. Kofi was his usual public self, smiling, shaking hands, acting like the perfect husband. But Amara wasn't fooled. Not tonight. She noticed how he kept checking the time, how he kept scanning the entrance like he was waiting for someone. And then it clicked. He wasn't just planning a dinner. He was planning a moment, one that would hurt her, humiliate her, break her. But what Kofi didn't know was that Amara wasn't the same woman he used to control with silence and guilt. She already knew his plan. And she was ready. Not with tears but with something far more powerful, grace. And the kind of calm that comes when you know exactly who you are, and exactly what you're about to do. The night was moving along smoothly. Music playing, people laughing, plates full of food. Amara sat at the long dinner table surrounded by familiar faces, smiling politely, her heart steady, her mind sharp. She had barely touched her plate. Her eyes kept scanning Kofi's movements, not out of fear, but out of quiet readiness. She had seen the signs. She knew something dramatic was coming. And then it happened. Kofi stood up suddenly and tapped his glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning toward him. He smiled the way he always did when he wanted to perform. Then, with no shame, he reached out his hand and pulled her in. Aisha. She had arrived late, wearing a shiny red dress that clung to her like she wanted all eyes on her. But in that moment, all eyes were on what Kofi did next. He held her waist, leaned in slowly, and kissed her. Right there. In front of family, friends, co-workers, elders. Long, slow, deep. And while his lips touched Aisha, his eyes never left Amara. It wasn't a kiss of love, it was a kiss of war. A cruel move meant to break her spirit, to make her snap, to humiliate her in front of everyone and prove that she had lost. The room went still. A fork dropped. Someone gasped. A few mouths hung open in shock. But Amara didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him, calm and poised, her chin slightly raised. Her heart was pounding, yes, but not from pain. From power. Because she had known. She had expected this. And while Kofi thought he was delivering the final blow, he didn't realize he had just given her the final proof she needed. In front of witnesses. He kissed another woman, but it was Amara's silence that screamed louder than anything in that room. Everyone at the dinner table held their breath, waiting for Amara to explode, to cry, to shout, to storm out. That was what they expected. That's what Kofi wanted. He thought his public kiss with Aisha would crush her, humiliate her beyond repair. But Amara didn't give him the scene he was hoping for. She just sat there quietly for a moment, looked straight into his eyes, and smiled. Not a fake smile. Not the kind you force when you're trying to hide pain. This was something different. Calm. Controlled. Powerful. The kind of smile that says, "You didn't break me. You freed me." The whole room froze. Conversations stopped. A few people exchanged awkward glances, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Even Aisha, still standing close to Kofi, looked uncomfortable, suddenly unsure of her role in this show. And Kofi? He looked shaken. That confident grin on his face slowly faded. He expected tears. He expected drama. But instead he got silence. And that smile. Amara picked up her glass of water, took a slow sip and gently placed it back down. Her eyes never left Kofi's face. And that smile never left her lips. In that one small moment she took back all her power, without saying a single word. Because sometimes strength isn't loud. It doesn't always come with shouting or breaking dishes. Sometimes it's in the calmness of a woman who's already made peace with her pain. A woman who no longer begs, no longer explains, no longer waits to be chosen. That night Amara's smile said everything. It told the world that she knew her worth, that she was done being hurt quietly. And most of all, it told Kofi that whatever control he thought he had over her heart was gone. Just like that. The room was still holding its breath when Amara did something no one expected. With the same calm and grace she had carried all night, she slowly reached into her handbag. No shaking hands. No rushing. Just steady, quiet movements. She pulled out a plain white envelope and placed it gently on the table, right in front of Kofi. Everyone watched, confused, curious. Kofi stared at it like it might explode. And then Amara finally spoke, her voice soft, but clear enough for the whole table to hear. "Since you've chosen her," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "I'm choosing me." The words echoed across the table like thunder. Silence fell even heavier. Kofi blinked, stunned. Aisha looked away. Amara sat back in her chair, still calm, still glowing with quiet strength. Inside the envelope were signed divorce papers. No threats, no drama, no messy scenes. Just a decision. A woman's decision to walk away with her dignity still intact. It wasn't just paper. It was power. It was every night she cried alone. Every time she was ignored. Every lie he told. All sealed neatly in that envelope. She had made her choice long before this dinner. Tonight was just the moment she let the world see it. Kofi reached for the envelope slowly, his hands no longer steady. His confidence was gone. The smile wiped clean from his face. He opened it and scanned the pages, trying to process what was happening. But it was already done. Amara didn't wait for his reaction. She had already seen enough. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need his regret. This wasn't about him anymore. In front of friends, family, and strangers, Amara didn't just take back her power. She handed it to herself, with quiet elegance and the kind of strength that doesn't need to be loud to be unforgettable. As Kofi held the white envelope in his hands, something shifted in the air. It was like the whole room was frozen in time, watching a man who was always so sure of himself suddenly lose all control. He opened the envelope slowly, his fingers trembling. His eyes moved across the papers, reading the words he never thought he'd see. Divorce papers already signed. Neatly done. No begging. No warnings. Just a decision made without him. The color drained from his face, like someone had flipped a switch and turned off all the pride he once carried. His usual confidence, the one he wore like a jacket, slipped right off his shoulders. He looked smaller somehow, like a boy who just realized the game was over, And he had lost something he thought he could always take for granted. Kofi glanced up at Amara, hoping maybe her face would show some hesitation. Maybe a tear. Maybe doubt. But there was nothing. Just peace. Just power. Her eyes didn't flinch. Her smile didn't fade. And that calm, graceful presence only made his panic grow stronger. People around the table looked at him, waiting for him to say something, anything. But for the first time in a long time, Kofi had no words. No speech. No charm. He sat there holding the paper that ended everything he once had, everything he thought he controlled. And that was the real victory. Not the divorce papers. Not the envelope. But the silence. The way Amara said so much without raising her voice. The way she broke years of pain with one single act of strength. In that moment, she didn't just walk away from a broken marriage. She walked away as the woman who ended it with grace, not bitterness. Kofi realized too late that the woman he thought he could hurt in front of everyone had just shown him, and the whole world, that she never needed him to rise. She was already standing tall, long before he fell. Aisha had walked into the dinner with her head high, full of confidence. She wore her bold red dress like a trophy, smiling proudly beside Kofi as if she had already won. All night, she laughed too loud, leaned too close to him, and soaked in the attention like she belonged there. She thought this night was hers, a celebration of her victory. But that confidence began to fade the moment Amara placed the white envelope on the table. And by the time Amara said, "Since you've chosen her, I'm choosing me," the room had already shifted. Now Aisha stood stiffly beside Kofi, unsure where to look. The eyes that once admired her outfit now avoided her. The smiles had faded. She could feel the silence pressing on her skin like heat. Amara's strength filled the space like a quiet storm, and suddenly Aisha looked smaller. Not because of her height or her dress, but because the woman she thought she had replaced never crumbled. Amara didn't cry, didn't fight, didn't try to compete. She just rose calmly and gracefully, leaving Aisha standing in a shadow that wasn't hers to claim. People who once smiled at Aisha now looked at her differently. Not with admiration, but with quiet judgment. Some shook their heads. Some whispered behind glasses. Aisha could feel it. The approval she once expected had turned into awkward silence. She wasn't the star of the night anymore. She was just the side character in a story that wasn't about her strength, but about another woman's dignity. She stood there beside Kofi, hoping he would say something, do something to take control. But he was too stunned, too quiet. And for the first time, Aisha realized she hadn't won anything. What she took pride in, stealing someone else's man, had now turned into a moment of public shame. And as Amara stood and walked out of the room like a queen, Aisha remained behind, still quiet, and deeply unsure of where she truly belonged. Amara didn't say another word. She didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken louder than any speech ever could. With calm, steady hands, she stood up from her chair, gently adjusted her green head wrap, and lifted her chin just a little higher. Every eye in the room followed her, but she didn't flinch. She didn't look back at Kofi. She didn't look at Aisha. She had already given them enough of her time, her love, her peace. Her chitinge dress flowed behind her like a royal train, brushing the floor as she walked, slow, graceful, powerful. The kind of walk that didn't come from anger, but from a deep, unshakable knowing of her worth. She didn't rush. She didn't stumble. She floated like a queen leaving behind a room full of noise she had outgrown. People moved aside quietly, parting like waves, unsure whether to clap or cry. No one dared to stop her. No one dared to speak. The same mouths that once whispered behind her back were now silent, humbled by the strength they had just witnessed. Kofi sat frozen, still holding the divorce papers, still processing what had just happened. Aisha stood awkwardly, eyes darting around, hoping for support that never came. But Amara didn't see any of it. She didn't need to. Her heart was already past them. This wasn't an escape. It wasn't a breakdown. This was an exit, one she had prepared for, prayed through, and powered up to take. She wasn't walking out as a broken wife. She was walking out as a whole woman. One who had finally chosen herself over a love that stopped choosing her a long time ago. And as she stepped into the elevator, leaving the rooftop and everything on it behind, not a single word followed her. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes when a storm passes, and something beautiful begins. By the next morning, the whole of Mbale was talking. The dinner that was supposed to be Kofi's grand moment had turned into Amara's unforgettable exit. Someone had recorded the scene, the kiss, the envelope, the silence, the walkout. The video spread like wildfire. It was on WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. People replayed it over and over, watching how Amara didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't lose control. She just smiled, placed the envelope on the table, and walked away like a queen who knew exactly who she was. Women across the city couldn't stop talking about her. Did you see how calm she was? She handled it with class. That's how you take back your power. They called her bold, fearless, beautiful. Her name was on everyone's lips. Some even called her a role model, not because she left a man but because she chose herself without turning bitter. Even men, the ones who usually stayed quiet about these things, admitted it. She's strong. She didn't make noise. She made a point. The whispers turned into loud conversations. In salons, offices, marketplaces, and group chats, people praised how Amara didn't just walk away, she made a statement. She changed how people saw heartbreak. She didn't let it break her. She turned it into a moment that inspired others. Women who were hurting in silence watched her and began to question their own situations. Some said, "If Amara can do it, maybe I can too." Kofi's reputation? Damaged. Aisha? Forgotten. But Amara? She became something more. Not just a woman who left a cheating husband, but a woman who left a legacy. A reminder that dignity is louder than drama. That silence, when filled with strength, can echo across a whole city. Amara didn't just make an exit. She made history in her own way, quietly, gracefully, and completely in control. Amara's new apartment was small, but it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, every corner of her home felt like hers. She picked out bright curtains that let in the sunlight, soft cushions that made her smile, and bold wall art that reflected her spirit. There were fresh flowers on the table, warm colors on the walls, and quiet peace in the air. No tension. No cold silence. Just a woman rebuilding her life one gentle step at a time. She started dancing again. Not for anyone else but for herself. On lazy Sunday mornings she'd turn on her favorite Afrobeat playlist, tie her hair up in a scarf, and move like no one was watching. The music filled her home, but it was her laughter that filled the space the most. That deep, real kind of laugh that only comes when the weight on your chest is finally gone. Amara began wearing her boldest colors again. Yellows, reds, deep blues. All the shades that used to make her feel alive. She no longer dressed to impress someone who never noticed. She dressed for joy, for power, for her reflection in the mirror. And every time she stepped out, people saw it. The glow, the peace, the strength in her smile. She spent more time with herself, with friends who lifted her, and with women who said, "You've inspired me." And in quiet moments when the world slowed down, Amara looked back, not with regret but with pride. She didn't just survive the pain. She walked through it with dignity and came out shining brighter than before. She hadn't lost anything. She had simply made space, for peace, for laughter, for herself. And in doing that, she returned to the woman she was before heartbreak dimmed her light. Only this time she was stronger, wiser, and absolutely unshakable. After the video of Amara's calm, powerful exit went viral, her inbox started to fill with messages. Not just from friends, but from women she had never met. Strangers from all parts of Mbale and beyond were reaching out. Some wrote long paragraphs. Others just said, "Thank you." But every message carried the same truth. Amara had become their voice. The voice they didn't know they needed. Women told her their stories. Some had been hiding years of silent pain. Others were too afraid to leave. But after watching her walk away with dignity and grace, something inside them shifted. "You gave me courage," one woman wrote. "Because of you I packed my bags," another shared. "I'm choosing me now." Her strength became their mirror, reflecting back to them the truth that they deserved better too. Amara didn't expect to become a symbol. She never planned to be a hero. She just chose herself, in a world that constantly tells women to choose everything and everyone else first. But her one brave choice became a spark, and that spark started fires of freedom in hearts all over the city. She was invited to speak at women's groups, community circles, and healing events. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real. She spoke simply from the heart. About pain. About silence. About how leaving doesn't mean you failed. It means you remembered your worth. Every time she shared her story, another woman stood up a little straighter. Another woman dried her tears. Amara didn't just walk away from a man who stopped choosing her. She walked into a purpose far bigger than her past. She became proof that healing is possible, that freedom is beautiful, that when one woman stands tall, others rise with her. She became the voice, and she used it not to scream, but to remind others they could still begin again. The sun was setting behind Betrayal, painting the sky in soft gold and deep orange. Amara stood on the balcony of her apartment, the city stretching out quietly below her. She wore a flowing mustard yellow dress that moved gently in the evening breeze. The light touched her skin like a blessing, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely at peace. No more pretending. No more waiting to be chosen. No more shrinking to make someone else feel bigger. Her hands rested calmly on the railing as she breathed in the warm air, her heart no longer heavy. She didn't look back with sadness. She didn't wish for the past to return, because she didn't win him back. She won herself. Her laughter was real now. Her peace was her own. And her strength? Unshakable. Inside, her home was filled with soft music, scented candles, and quiet joy. But out here under the open sky, she felt something even deeper: freedom. This was her new chapter. Not built on pain but on power. Not shaped by loss but by love for herself. Amara was no longer the woman who stayed silent. She was the queen who rose, reborn, glowing, whole.